everybody. Good Morgen. That's the end of my German. That's the extent that you get.
Cheers, Mike.
Before we start, I want to give special thanks to the people who have the hardest job of the day. If you want to turn around and just wave at that booth at the back. Vivian and Michael, who have to translate my keynote into German. So good luck with that. So good morning. I want to start, it's great to be in Berlin. The last time I was in Germany was a couple of months ago for Wacken Open Air. So anyone who was there, that was kind of cool. It's good to be here to be talking about recruiting. And I'm speaking about something different. As was said in the introduction, I've worked in recruiting actually for 35 years, so a little bit longer than was said. I started when I was 16. I now work with technology companies, so startups on tech. I work with some fairly big brands like Oracle and BBC and Naspers on the technology they do and the method of work. And generally when somebody contacts me or calls me to get me to come and look at something, it's not because it's going well. I'm usually brought in to deal with a problem. And I tend to look at things a bit differently, and I take a lot of my inspiration or understanding about how the world works from places outside of recruiting, outside of our recruiting bubble. Equally, is anyone here doing the social talent videos at all? Social talent training, anyone? Because I would also point out I do a little bit more than social talent, but I am the guy from social talent video. And one of the things that I'm really interested in is how do people communicate? How do people cut through noise? Because really, as a recruiter, that's my single biggest challenge. Finding people is easy. There's a massive myth, a lie, a bullshit if you want to call it that people talk about, which is that there is a war for talent. There is no war for talent. There is no shortage of talent in the world. What is difficult, and there's no difficulty finding people. That's easier than ever before. What is complicated is connecting and cutting through the noise, because there's so many people doing it, right? So the very essence of social recruiting is how do I message and connect with an audience of one? And what I was really interested in is, okay, what's the most successful, where are the biggest recruiting campaigns go on? And that's actually in terms of politics. So I'm going to talk for about 30 minutes, Trump, Brexit, May and all that. If you're in the bar later, I'll talk about it for a lot longer. But I'm good, because I was really interested in kind of the crazy stuff that's gone on. This particular talk it's not about politics, so I'm not going to give particular viewpoints, although you may be able to guess what mine is. But there is a situation, and I travel the world. I'm fortunate enough to speak in lots of places, and people come up to me and say kind of, what do you think? Especially in America, they come and say, what do you think about stuff that's going on in America? Or lots of people say, what do you think about Brexit? Or what do you think about the general election campaign? And it's fair to say that I compare life now to living in an advent calendar of shit. And the reason I say that is every morning I open it up to see what's happened overnight. So I get this feeling, W2F, what's happened overnight, what's been said, and how did this stuff happen? How did these results happen? And really, it's an absolute study in digital marketing, which is kind of what we do, right? It's digital marketing. How do we get a message across, cut through the noise, and convince people to do something, right? And that's really what you're trying to do day to day. And how do you move into this new world? How do we move into this new world where we're connecting and speaking, with people in amongst all the noise and trying to get our message across in a crowded space? How do we actually do that? And how do we win the battle for attention when people are getting thousands of messages every day, and the default section is swipe right? The default section is let's ignore it, let's disregard it, whether it's an email, a tweet, Facebook, a post, an update, some carefully crafted video. So I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn from this. But the biggest one, which was the first starting point, is if you look at the work of a company called Cambridge Analytica. I don't know if anyone knows Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica is owned by a guy called Robert Mercer, who was the major funder of the Trump campaign and was also a big influence on the Brexit vote in the UK, right? So, what Cambridge Analytica did, I met these guys 7 years ago. They came from Cambridge, and they developed a tool which at the time was for recruiting. And they were talking about the fact that we could take anyone's Facebook feed or social media feed and profile them in terms of their preferences and what they were interested in. And for the last 7 years, they've been sending out questionnaires, particularly in Facebook, asking things like, what Harry Potter character are you? What movie star would you be? What character from the past would you be? And within that, gaining access to social media profiles and also asking psychometric questions in order to profile people. And they've profiled about, the estimate is about 70% of Facebook has been profiled in this way, right? And at the time we thought that was kind of witchcraft, but it's been really apparent in what we're doing because, and the reason for this, and this is why I think I became interested in this in terms, as it applies to our recruiting world, is once we started looking at the connection between convincing and profiling people and messaging was quite simple. So in politics, if you want to message someone from a political point of view, it's very simple. People sit in 3 groups in terms of where they're at. And I think that's a lot like job seeking. And the 3 groups that they're in, they're either on the left or they're on the right. And they might have been, that's usually either family or upbringing or some major incidents, but it's pretty easy to look at them and say, right, these people are left or right. They're probably not for shifting. They're going to go, and when they cast their vote, they're going to do it that way. So actually, there's not a lot of point in trying to reach those people with a message or content. But in the middle lies the biggest group of people, which are the ones who are neither one nor the other. They might like a little bit left, they might like a little bit right, but generally they're open to persuasion as their vote's up for grabs, right? And that's the big recruitment exercise. And when I look at it from a hiring point of view, whenever I talk about an organisation, I look at the target audience the same way. Who are the people we're trying to reach and how do we divide them? And you can look at those people in exactly the same 3 boxes, right? So what do you have? You have active job seekers. They're the people who are going to job boards. They're what you'd consider low-hanging fruit in that they're already applying for jobs. They're already active in the market. And actually, yeah, we want to give them easy access to apply, but that's not the audience I'm after, because they're already applying. If I put an ad out somewhere, someone will apply to that, and that will fill a certain amount of what I do. And then we've got people on the other end who are really not moving. They're not looking at stuff, they're not engaging stuff, and they're happy in their job. So I want to connect with them, but I don't want to spend my time messaging them. And the more that I message them, the more annoying I become, because the more out of the activity I do becomes spam. It becomes an irritant. But there's people in the middle. Most of the people sit in the middle, and that's the people who I want to connect with, who would engage and look at something, but aren't actually applying for stuff or being active in the market. And that's generally where the bulk of the talent is. So how do I reach those people who aren't looking at jobs, aren't looking at things, but would be open to some engagement? How do I provide them with something that's interesting enough? And the reality is breaking it down into what they're interested in. And what they did, particularly in the Trump campaign and the Brexit campaign, was identified that there were, within politics, there was 15 pillars of things which would excite someone in the US campaign. So that might have been, we'll let you keep your guns because you're really excited about guns. Or it might have been pro-birth. It might have been a religious agenda. It might have been, we'll build a wall and stop the Mexicans from climbing over the wall because you were really worried about immigration, whatever it was. And that's what they were able to do in the Trump campaign is, if you can profile people that's the message that they'll respond to, just send them that stuff. Just talk to them about that. Don't talk to them about other things, because then you'll get their attention and they'll engage and join you. And exactly the same thing happened in the UK in the Brexit campaign. There were kind of 15 things again. It was either immigration, independence, sovereignty, all this kind of stuff. If I keep giving you that message and saying, if you put your cross in this box, if you put your cross in this box, we will protect that. So that thing that you get excited and motivated about, it's really important for me to know that, because that's the only message I want to give you. That's what happened in the Trump campaign. They were able to identify, actually, most of the people, most of the votes available sit in these 15 boxes. And so when we go and look at organisations and think, well, actually, yeah, am I just a mad guy, or does this message actually apply? And why I believe it applies is I think we break employer brands and organisations down into kind of 10 or 15 things. These are the messages. This is the organisation that will enable you to get promoted, or you're really excited, or flexible working is really important to you, or women in engineering is really important to you, whatever it is. If we can profile before we message what you're interested in and deliver that message to you specifically, we'll get your attention. And that's really what we're battling for in recruiting. It's not about getting people to apply, it's about getting your attention and maintaining it. One of the worst metrics we use in recruiting these days is looking at success and saying success is retention of employment. That's not a good measure. Retention of employment is generally a measure of how bad companies are at sacking people, as a general measure. What is important is retention of relationship. Will you stay connected with me? Will you open our content? Will you engage with us? Will you come back to us continuously? And how do I retain that? And I do that by understanding who you are and what you are and giving you that message. So, and I think there's a starting point as to how we could do that within recruiting circles. But let's start to look at some of the messages. Let's begin to understand them, to understand how they work. So the first thing is a single message, communicating people with one single message which connects with their interest, right? So the traditional marketing technique was, let's go out and advertise to the many, let's give our message to the many in the hope that the few will go, I'm actually interested in that. Let's reach as many people as possible. We're saying is a single message, person by person, using a lot of technology to do that, but sending people a single message that says, if you look at this company, ultimately this is what you're interested in, this thing. This is what's going to excite you at this moment in time. And it's a single message, usually very short text. Different formats work in different channels. I'm lucky enough to do a lot of analytics and look at the data for a company called Symphony, who have about 120 career sites. And we've been looking at what content works. From a social point of view, what messages and what content works is very, very different channel to channel. If we send the same message, same format out in every channel, so if we put the same thing in Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Snapchat, wherever we're doing it, if we put the same content out there, it doesn't work in some of those channels because the audience is different and the audience behaves in a different way. The people behave in a very individual and unique way. So what works, just to share with you just a little bit of stuff that works, what really works? LinkedIn, the content that gets the most engagement or interaction, which is really what you want with your content if you're going to be social. The content that gets the most engagement. On LinkedIn, bit of a surprise, photos. Photos in updates. But photos of employees. Photos of people doing things. That is the content that works best. Works better than written content and everything else. That gets the most engagement. Why do I want engagement? Because engagement creates visibility. And if you want to talk about what influence of a brand is visibility, creating visibility. How do you create visibility? You create visibility by provoking reaction. And it really doesn't matter what that reaction is. This is what the politicians had really worked out, is that if we provoke you into reacting, whether you react with something positively or negatively, it doesn't matter. The fact that you liked it or were provoked into commenting on it or sharing it means you're opening up the footprint of visibility to your network every time you take an action. And you're creating a footprint. I wanted to play around to see about this. So for the last year, I've been engaging with some crazy Trump guys and some extreme Christian fundamentalists to see if that changed my social media feed, if that changed my view of the internet. And it did completely. So the posts that get put in my timelines and my updates, the visibility that I have, is largely driven by a guy called Rob Drogball, if someone wants to look that out, who's kind of just right of Donald Trump. And I've used that to change my view of the internet, because once we understand how the internet works, that's how we understand what content works. So LinkedIn is pictures about people. Twitter is social pictures about work. Always a picture. If you have a picture, in terms of the tracking that we're doing, I'm not saying it's absolute, but the tracking we're doing says if you put a picture in, you're 8 times more likely to get engagement. Right, very simple. That picture needs to be of social occasions at work. Birthdays, parties, pets. Dogs are a massive one. Everyone posts a picture of your dog. We start to create visibility of content. That's on Twitter, is social interaction. Facebook is video, but again, video of employees talking about personal experiences. And the big one for LinkedIn in terms of pictures and stories was employee recognition. So-and-so did a great job, or were fantastic, here's their picture. On Facebook, it was personal stories, making emotional connection in the video. And it wasn't video which was very expensive produced. It needed to be iPhone, a little bit shaky, a little bit wobbly, that kind of stuff. That's what works on Facebook. That's what gets engagement. Something that provokes a reaction, normally no longer than 30 seconds. You have to go to extremes in video, by the way. Video or podcast content, extremes. It has to be 30 seconds or over an hour to have credibility. Anywhere in between that, waste of time in terms of what appears, right? So so that is Facebook. So different channels work in different ways. And this is why the most important thing you need to do is, for me, profile your targets. Forget about looking for candidates or applicants. You could go out and source and build a talent map of every single person in the market, and you can look at their online digital behavior and identify what will appeal to them. You don't have to do that manually. That's an automated process. There's loads of tools for doing that stuff. Because what you're trying to actually produce in content is memes. Memes are the most important thing. I wanted to know what a meme was. I made the mistake of asking my children, which brought about much amusement. But a meme, which is a big thing in political messaging. There's whole meme factories. A meme is any content which is viral on the internet. So don't think it's just the pictures and cartoons, but memes, a picture or a video that has a message which resonates, which doesn't require someone to think about it, that's quite clear. That's the stuff that gets shared. Headlines, you don't want your headlines to be more than 80 characters. We have Twitter brains, and usually the only thing we see is headline, right? So if you're sending messages out, you want to hit them with 80 characters. If you want to know, this is the most important reason you should be serious about thinking about messaging and messaging by mobile. This is the most important statistic that convinced me I needed to look at mobile about 4 years ago. And that is, in European building regulation now, when they build a public building, they have to provide as many sit-down toilets for men as they do women. Does that mean men's habits have changed because of diet or something like that? No. It means everyone wants to sit down and check their phone, right? Generally. So I always think when I'm messaging anyone is they're probably in the most important room in the house, and I'm probably battling for their attention with something else, which is a more pressing need. So how am I going to cut through that and get their attention? A single message which is really easy for them to understand with a call to action to something else. That's really what I'm doing in my messaging. So single message, no more than 120 characters, and short form content gets attention. Candidates are interested in short form, applicants are interested in long form, right? And you have to have a fundamental difference in your approach to candidates and applicants. Look at them as two different things. Candidate is anyone who wants to connect with you. Applicant is someone who's going to apply for a job. usually by invitation. So how much do we know about them? And applicants are interested in long form. Forget that you'll read loads of myths by people, usually vendors, saying the job description is dead. No one's interested in a job description. If you actually look at the data for people on career sites, what you'll see is actually everybody wants to access a job description at the point they're an applicant. Everybody wants to look at long-form content about the job, and about the job, not about the company, when they've become an applicant. Once they want to go into that process, what convinced them, because applying for a job is painful. It's painful. Getting a job now is built to be Game of Thrones. The person who gets the job at the end is not the person, is not the applicant who is best qualified or best suited, but the last applicant alive. The last one who could stick it out and battle the dragons and do all the stuff you want me to do to get the job is the one generally who gets the job, right? Because we've built it that way. For God forbid we hire the right people. That would be a terrible thing. So let's make it really hard for people. And we've done that. So people want to be convinced that it's worth the pain. This is going to be worth the pain, right? So they're kind of interested in that stuff. So short form. And what do we mean by memes? This is one of my favorites. I kind of love this. When we're talking about an image, there's loads of these. If you want to get any of these, this is called littledonaldtrump.com. I get my daily dose every morning. It's the first thing that pops up on my screen. I need it every morning. So it's thinking about, okay, maybe we don't have a little Donald Trump we can stick in a little car, but how can we convey a message in a picture that says the message we want to say so that someone can look at it and understand it? And create a meme, right? Because if we create a meme and get a reaction, we're going to get influence. So where does influence come from? Interesting thing in politics is influence comes from visibility, and if you're using content on Facebook and social media channels sit outside of publishing rules in terms of what you're allowed to say. Very important thing in politics. So you can spread fake news or lies or anything you want, it sits outside of the rules. Now, I'm not saying you should be lying about it, but understand that there's new school rules to this. There's a different way of operating to the way that you're used to. You need a different mindset and a different set of rules. It's kind of the unregulated Wild West right now in politics. Anyone can do anything. The really interesting thing is what happened in the last election in the UK, what was really clear from that was actually the content producers and the people producing the messages weren't from within the parties. They were fans or supporters. They were people who were creating content, but the parties and individuals were putting money behind it to promote it, because that creates real visibility. Think of a sniper via broadcast approach if you want to be social in what you're doing. Broadcast means let's send a message to everyone. Sniper says let's send a message to one. A single message to a single person based on what we know about them, based on their profile, right? So it's taking that sniper approach to do it. Influence will be visibility. So that means it's having clear call to action, and everything that you're doing in terms of content or creating or putting it out there has a next thing someone can do if they choose to. It's not pushed on them, but there is a call to action. There is a next step. There is something for them to do. And don't be frightened to actually pay for that. Start looking at things like programmatic ads, images, stories. Think about paid for organic. SEO, I believe, as a concept, SEO is kind of a waste of time. Because when I go down an SEO route, I'm constantly playing catch up with Google or whatever they want to control. When I buy that traffic or buy visibility by buying likes or fans or anything like that, then actually buying it is easier and cheaper than growing it. There's a lot of reasons once you have that traffic, you should engage and grow it with the right content. But so something like if I have a YouTube video and I want 1 million likes on it of the right kind of audience, what do you think that would cost me to get 1 million likes or 1 million shares? What do you think that would cost to pay for that? Or 1 million likes on my Facebook page? $220. So for a small amount of money, I can promote and make posts trend. That's also what people do on Twitter. You've got a story, one of your employees does something, put some money behind it, it will trend, which creates visibility in a target audience that you're trying to reach. and think about retargeting. So that's kind of the messages I took away, was this: how did they succeed in this crazy stuff, was having a single message which was very clear, delivered different in every channel, and was to the person. It isn't about A/B testing anymore. Have 100 messages and test them all with different people. See what resonates, do your analytics, do your tracking, then you can begin to be successful. Thanks, everybody. We're doing any Q&A? Or?
Bill Boorman, thank you so much for that start into the day. We have time for 2 questions from the audience. So anyone who wants this opportunity to ask Bill anything?
And I will answer anything.
He will answer it. So now is your time. I'll give you a second to think about. Bill, I have a question, because you talked about a single message per person by person. How do you do that? I
think it's quite simple. So it's time, right? So the point is, you have to do your messaging and data collection in an automated way, right? I think automation is more personal by targeting, by getting the right message to the right person.
Yeah.
Right, which is really what digital marketing is about nowadays. It's timing. So in the political example, for Momentum, the Labour Party, one of the things they were able to do was identify the thing that you were concerned about out of 15 key factors and deliver a meme to you outside the polling booth by using geolocation tracking. So just before you went and voted, it was a reminder. So if we can track what your behaviours are, it's the same as anything. It's the same as, you know, I turn up in Berlin and my Facebook feed says, here's 3 restaurants. These are the ones your friends have been to. They know from my tracking that I really like Japanese, so because I've checked into lots of Japanese places, so 2 out of 3 of the recommendations are for sushi. Right? So that's on a simplistic level, but you can buy access to that data through any of the social media channels, or you can build your own tracking. So I think it's building tracking and looking at multiple pieces of multiple ways of telling the same message, but making it one single message. I think the thing that's really kind of confused people about this is this craziness about employer brand. We've had this idea that we call EVP, employee value proposition. The idea of the employee value proposition is everyone who works for the company works there for the same 4 or 5 reasons. That's nuts. That's nuts. There's no way the guy in accounts works for the company for the same reason as the chief developer, or has the same values or the same vision. That suggests everyone is exactly the same, right? We haven't got to the bot workforce yet. What's important is the IVP. What's the individual value proposition? What's going to matter to you, and how do I understand, connect, and deliver that message? And we can do a lot of that in, I think, the first thing you do is you talent map. You go and get everyone. Forget about looking for candidates. Look for people. Who are all the people who could work for us at some point or be connected with people. Let's build a talent map of them. Let's look at what their interests are, their motivations are, and let's produce content to that talent map and look at who connects with us, but make it really easy for them to become candidates and applicants if they want to.
Right.
But let's look at the market as a whole, and let's look at what's trending and what stories are working. And let's use data. Let's really think about this.
That sounds right. Any questions of the audience? There's one question right here. We have a microphone coming up for you. Just right here, 2nd row.
Microphone's coming quickly.
Hi. You were talking about the IVP. That was the first time I ever heard about it.
Yeah.
And we're right now in our company about to create the EVP, which we thought was kind of a big deal. Apparently not.
I don't mean to rubbish what people do. Yeah.
How do we get the IVP then? Do we?
The IVP. This is what it's really. It's about connecting people to have conversations. And if I look at job seeker behaviour, the behaviour is very clear. When you track, because the great thing with the internet is you can track every action, even if nobody touches something. You can see everywhere that people look, and you can see the journey that they take from. One of the really interesting things we got from the Symphony data was the journey. Where does things like Glassdoor fit in? It fits in not as an attraction, but as a last piece. So generally, people go from social media person to social media company to career site to job. And social if somebody is attracted by social media, if they come from a social media link, and I'm giving you data from a particular set of 120 companies across the globe. So I'm not saying this is absolute science, I'm just saying this is the science that I know. From 120 companies, what we're seeing is that if somebody is coming from social media, so they've originated from a person and gone and look at something, they look at 8 times more content on a career site than people who come from SEO. From SEO, they tend to go to job. Now, those people are really important, right? Because they're the people who are going to come look at a job, apply, and some of them are going to be right and some of them are going to be wrong. People from social media, if they're coming from Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, are going to want a whole different, unique experience. So when it comes to IVP, for me, it's about, from the first point of contact you have with someone, you start tracking what their behaviours are. What were the things they looked at? What did they open? Where did they go? And how do we provide that experience? A few years ago, it was explained to me by a company who said to think of it like this. When we read a newspaper, if we think about how we want to view a career site when we go there, when I read a newspaper, everybody reads a newspaper in a unique way. If you have an old-fashioned folded paper, I like to have one at the weekend, kind of a hobby to read the paper. When you get that newspaper, you might look at the sport, the headline, the politics, but everybody looks at different places. If you could deliver the content in the order in which you look at it, I'm going to give you a great experience. And I'm not going to show you stuff that you're not going to look at. If I start tracking that, I can identify by what you react to the things that are important to you in terms of your individual values. How much time do you spend on certain content? How much do you look at certain stuff? So, and then it's about who do you want that message from, right? So you don't want that message from a marketing department. And if I'm thinking about joining a company, the last person I want to speak to is a recruiter. I really don't want, candidates don't want to connect with recruiters. Because actually, this is the mistake people make when it comes to branding, and then I'll jump off, this is the big mistake that people make, is we think when we build career sites and social sites and we send messaging out, we said working at our company is kind of like people's Facebook life. Facebook life says everything's great, everything's cool, here's a picture of Instagram life, here's a picture of me being excellent at everything. My life's really happy. Work isn't like that. Work is like voting. This is why I was really interested in this. So when people go to vote in elections, they don't vote for the person they believe in the most, the best party, the person who's going to change their future. They vote for the person who is least shit. Who is the one I distrust the most? That's actually what getting a job is like for most people. Most people aren't out there saying, who is the greatest employer, the greatest future for me? They're out there saying, which place is going to be least shit? I haven't won the lottery yet and I've got to work somewhere. And who am I going to believe when they tell me that story? The person I'm going to believe is someone who does that job. I want to speak with someone who says, so this is why things like brand advocates is crazy. You know, if you have a brand advocate policy, you elect people to go out and tell your EVP and tell your message. This is generally what happens. Brand advocates are kind of like born-again Christians. Really nice people, don't want to sit next to them on a plane. Because people who love work are weird. They're really strange people. And if I go out for a beer, I don't want to go out for a beer with someone who's going to talk to me about work all night. I want people with lots of interest. So how do I connect people so that they can talk on an individual basis? How do I create that experience? And social and having the right connection, giving people the right permission is the right way to do that. And give people permission and get people to talk who think your company's okay. Otherwise, the only people who talk about your company is the extremists. And I don't want to hear from either of them. So either the people who completely hate it or the completely love it. How do I get to the people in the middle? Because that's the real people, and that's also where the real candidates are. And that's your challenge.
So there's a nice pickup line for your next employer strategy. Our company is the least shit. Start with that and then get engaged.
This is why we're not as shit as the other ones.
Bill, are you going to stay around for lunchtime a little bit?
I'm around for lunch. I'm around tomorrow morning. So
perfect. So
find me, friend me, connect with me, poke with me, tweet with me, whatever you want. Just don't send me an email because I probably won't read it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Bill.